Alright, guys, what's up? Welcome back to Tomboy Official, back to the podcast. I'm like over 2 weeks behind uh on posting the daily updates. Um I don't really know what I think about the daily updates, guys. Part of me is like, it's just, you know, I think people know the reason why I started doing them was because I tend to kind of ramble when I'm talking about actual topics. And so that kind of puts the rambling all into one space for the most part. And, so at least I can kind of stay on topic and not, veer off. But I don't know of how much interest it is because it is a bunch of random stuff. Um, like the purpose of it isn't necessarily even for oh direct value sake. It's more for um yeah, a form of representation maybe. Just putting stuff out there for representation's sake. Um but I haven't really been recording a lot of unique material on this podcast. I've kind of it's kind of hard to do when I'm not going out or doing things. I'm kind of just living my life otherwise, in all honesty. And I've talked about it before, it's kind of a closeted life. I'm just very just in this religious household of just people that I don't think are kind of up to date with the times or whatever. Um, I mean, I don't really even want to get into it. There's not even any actual. I don't really have any actual method of like really dealing with anything. I just kind of ignore it, but live my life. And I guess the way I do it is I kind of just don't involve, my family in my life for the most part. I'm not talking like siblings, but, I'm closer to family members when I'm living in this house. My mom's always here, my dad's here when he feels like it. They're always talking to my aunts, uncles, cousins. They're always in touch with each other about everything on the phone multiple days out of the week. And so, you know, they talk to each other about whatever it is they want to talk about. And, I kind of overhear things that get said. And, a lot of it is tied to religious thinking that I'm just not really that interested in thinking like that. Things like, if somebody says something like, oh, um, if somebody says something like, I guess an example, um, I think my mom was talking to one of my cousins once about something. I don't even know. Like, I just overhear because everyone talks loud on the phone. And they're chit chatting and talking about somebody who was cursing about something. I can't remember what it was. And, my mom makes this comment of, well, if they're Christian, they shouldn't be like cursing or whatever it was. And, the other day she made some kind of comment. Um, I don't even remember what it was, but it was another thing kind of along those lines about like, oh, that's what it was, because my sister went to a wedding and, you know, um, it was with people that I knew from, I don't know, like they're kind of like people I knew from like extendedly through people through church. Like if people know about the Adventist church in LA, there's definitely a lot of Latinos and a lot of Filipinos. And I mean, there's a lot of everybody, honestly, but I would say those are pretty large groups. And, this is like, it was a wedding for someone I grew up around, who's a Filipina lady. And um, I was asking, my mom, like, what time is my sister going to be back from the wedding? Or if she said, and, my mom makes this, I, I I think I don't remember exactly her wording, but I was like, you know, maybe they'll be there till midnight, because if they have like a reception, because a lot of times the receptions, they have the food and the entertainment, and then the DJ might stay till midnight and just like dancing or whatever. And I was like, yeah, it's a Filipino family, so they might have a large family and it might be a big wedding and it might have a lot of people. And she was like, well, it kind of depends like how Christian they are or something like that, And I was just kind of like, what? Because I know what that was kind of implying with like the dancing and the music and the drinking and different forms of entertainment is kind of like, the really strict religious people don't really um, do that too much, or if they do, they kind of keep it more, to themselves in some ways. So there was kind of that conversation where I was kind of, I don't know, um, like I wouldn't say I feel like directly judged. I just feel kind of like it's just easier for me to kind of just keep to myself and not really share about my life or about my interests or about anything because I feel like my family, like the older generation, is like very much in another world. Like they're very much not in, like they're not as far out of mainstream society as like some Mennonite groups or Amish groups or Hasidic groups. They're not like that strict, but they aren't exactly like very mainstream. Like there's like my dad doesn't watch rated R movies or movies with cursing or pretty much anything that has shows or anything that has like cursing. Like the only thing we can really watch as a family is sports or Family Feud. Maybe some of those judge shows, but outside of those three types of shows, it's just, like news maybe too. They like the news a lot. But outside of those categories, I find it hard to find anything that we could sit and watch that my dad's actually going to watch. Um, and then my mom, she'll watch like horror movies and thrillers and stuff like that. But, you know, like my, when my dad's around, we don't really have pork in the house. My mom never buys it. Um, it's not that they don't eat meat. Like we are very much a meat eating family. Um, but you know, it could be worse. They're not like shoving things down my throat, but in a way, I feel like they are sometimes. It's like I've even explicitly told them I don't want to be sent those family messages where every Saturday they send the link to the church, um, live live stream. I've I've mentioned that I don't want to see it, that I don't want to get it. I'm not gonna watch it, but still, without fail, every week my mom will send it in the family group text. So I just delete it, like, because it's annoying. Like things like that. Then I'm just like, I'm not gonna watch it. Stop sending it. But it's things like that where it's like part of me is like part of me wonders is like, okay, it's stuff that seems innocent enough, you know what I mean? It's like, but then at the same time, it's like I'm very cautious to people kind of like shoving their messages down my throat, and it does make it kind of hard for me to want to interact, um, because it's like at almost every turn, somebody could be, taking this religious stance about something, and I try not to get into debates about that kind of stuff. I'm fine knowing where I stand about things. I'm not saying people can't be Christian and gay or Christian and watch movies or whatever. Like, you can do whatever you're going to do. It's just, I haven't lived in this house up until more recently. And when I did leave, I was still kind of pretty connected with the religious people. Um, and so it's something I don't really like to talk about on here. I have other spaces where I talk about it more. Um, but the more I mean, I know that there are good people in religions that tend to want to do good, but the aspect of religion that I don't appreciate is the judgment part and the part of people, especially with Christianity, people can't really seem to let people just live their lives and not be a part of exactly living the way that they live. Like Christianity in mainstream society is really taught, people a lot of times are taught that everyone else who doesn't do exactly the traditions that your group is doing is lost in some way and they need help or else they're going to go to hell. There's kind of that message that people get. And so they kind of get this idea in their minds that, like, I need to share. I need to tell people, like, even if they don't want to know or don't really want to talk about it, I need to mention it every now and then. I need to, you know, be open about this kind of stuff. Like, it's kind of a bit overbearing. Whereas I feel like there are other religions that are kind of more quiet, and it's like you can do your religious practices and stay to yourself and do them, and you don't have to be like telling people about it or telling people what you think they need to do because of your religion and things like that. So, I mean, it's not like out of hand, but it's easier for me to just avoid it. Um, I do have a bit of an aversion towards like ultra religious people, and I wouldn't call my folks super ultra religious, but a lot of their friends and family are. So it's kind of hard to, I can't really remove myself from it completely without feeling like okay, um you know like people do talk about it, and for me it's not really something that I'm too interested in hearing about, mostly because I grew up in it and I've kind of made my peace with what I believe I should be doing as far as how I live my life. I'm not completely against religion. It's more so the disrespect and the judgment of some people who practice certain forms of religions. I'm most familiar with Christianity. A lot of times people don't really realize how they're coming across, and it gets to be a little bit like very one-sided, and like people don't like to think outside the box or challenge their thought processes. uh it just, to me, that's like there's not a lot of room to expand, there's not a lot of room to grow. And I think the religion and a lot of the beliefs kind of stay stuck in some past that's just not something I agree with. um I want to separate it from saying that, like, I think all Christians are like that. I think someone can be Christian and totally be okay and not be harassing people. But I do think that it's almost like the Christian way to be somewhat in people's face about their Christianity. Um, I mean, if you were to think about you know, um, I mean, I don't know. I don't really want to go on some to certain lengths talking about it because it's like I'm not against Christians. It's just I'm against people attempting to shove stuff down my throat or attempting to, I don't mind people just speaking their mind like, oh, I think this is wrong because I'm Christian. It's like, okay, that's good for you, but I don't like it when other people are like, I think this was wrong because I'm Christian and therefore you should not do this because I think is wrong, you know. And then people keep on going on from there. For me, that's the main issue. It's more that than anything else. Um, people have their own personal convictions, and even though Christianity does teach that, it also doesn't really teach people to stay in their lane. Um, it kind of promotes this like overbearing, um, this like you need to be a little bit overbearing because that's your duty as a Christian because you're right and everybody else is at risk. So it's kind of like a duty placed upon a lot of Christians that they feel that they need to be out there, spreading the good word because, they don't want their loved ones to go to hell. And I mean, just the belief in it being so strong and people not really being willing to like think outside of that. I mean, I'll be a little transparent. I don't believe in hell. I think it's a scare tactic. I mean, if it does exist and, people do go there, then we'll find out once it happens, right? But I don't see any benefit to thinking about the potential of hell. If I'm doing something just to avoid hell, is that really a good enough reason? It's almost like when you're a kid, and, you're doing something to avoid punishment, but what you're doing is maybe not necessarily wrong. It's just something that's not preferred. Like, say, for example, if you have like a parent or a guardian when you're a kid who tells you, when you go to school, when you eat your lunch, I want you to eat your vegetables first, like we do at home. I want you to make sure you eat your vegetables. So I packed you celery and carrots and tomato slices or whatever the heck, and the kids at school and they're like, I really don't want to eat these first, but somehow I think if I don't eat them first, or maybe the teacher will tell my parents that I didn't eat them first, and I might get in some kind of trouble, lectured or grounded or whatever the punishment might be. So in order to avoid that, I'm gonna eat these first, you know, just because I don't want to get punished. But what difference does it make if you eat them last? You know what I mean? It's really not gonna make a big deal. Like, the whole goal is that your parents want you to be nutritious and eat the vegetables first because there's the risk of you not eating vegetables during that meal. If you get filled up on the other food, you might not want to prefer the vegetables because who as a kid, most kids don't prefer vegetables. So something like that where it's like, well, is it wrong to eat the vegetables after your sandwich? No. But because your parents told you, now it's wrong. And because there's the fear of punishment, if you don't listen, you might still have that method of doing things. And yeah, you'll probably get more vegetables in your system if you follow that method. You probably won't have as many days where you get full or just don't find the vegetables appetizing, so you just kind of avoid them for that meal or whatever. You probably won't have as many days as that because you're forcing yourself to eat vegetables first thing. So it is healthier, but at the same time, it's like, you know, is it like wrong? And so there's a lot of stuff that I see that's like that, where it's more like a preference. It's like, yeah, like people prefer you to do this or that, but it's like, I feel like ultimately, if you're not being hateful and if you are being loving, you're not doing anything wrong. And that's all you really need to focus on. And that's my opinion. All you need to focus on is the aspect of love. And I feel like all the kind of like talk of hell and fear and brimstone and all that stuff. It's a very hateful message. Fear is not related to love, I don't think. Um, but the church kind of makes people think that way. Um, and there's just so many concepts that to me I just can't get on board with. I study a lot about indigenous cultures, and it's really hard for me to watch, how all these different churches got involved with these residential schools. It was mostly churches that were backing these, all kinds of churches. And before that, missionaries going into indigenous people's lands and trying to like do all this stuff and just, and it always is with this idea of we're doing them a favor. They need this message. They need this message of the church. They need this message of, um, you know, they need to stop doing their indigenous culture and traditions and follow this other religion. And if you think of every culture that had an indigenous background that got overtaken by some form of Christianity or Islam or something, and if you look deep into those cultures, I don't think you see that much benefit. But also, I would say we also don't have so much written history or oral history that we have so much access to where we can like hear the history of these people. Um and I have African roots for sure, and I mean more than roots. I mean most of my family is African. And having a lot of Africans, you know, and I have an uncle who I came across his, I think it was his dissertation from the 80s. He was at an Adventist school getting an education, and to be a theology major, to be a pastor, which I think he is a pastor. At least when I met him, he was, and he writes and things, and he talks about um his you know his dissertation was about his own culture. So the Debele and the Shona. He talks about how the missionaries came in and talked to these people and converted them, and his whole purpose of this article, or yeah, of his research, was to prove that Christianity is better than the ancient ancestral ways of his own culture. And so it's like, and that's almost the only research out there. Like I've looked, and this is from the 80s. There's not that much research out there. And part of me almost wants to make like a modernized version of like refuting this and being like, leave people alone. Just leave them alone. Like at this point, I don't think there's anyone who hasn't heard about Christianity. Now, I'll tell you this, I love Christianity as much as I'm talking, it sounds like I'm talking crap. I like the ideas of it. I like the ideas. I like the idea of Jesus. And Jesus being on earth just to set things right, and showing people how to live and not rejecting the people that society says to reject, and like you know having this counterculture against everything. Like he didn't live like the mainstream. He was trying to show like, hey, there's a lot of stuff going on that people are just like sucked into the matrix. Like get the heck out of that matrix. And you know you can hang out with people that your religion says don't hang out with. You can befriend people. If just because some government or some system or whatever says that these people are unclean or unworthy, doesn't mean that you can't be around them. um you know you can always show love to people if you have ability to heal and ability to speak good and to do good. You can do that with everybody. I like that message. I like that. I mean, I don't think I really have issues with Jesus. It's more so the modern version of what people actually do in Christianity. It gets out of hand sometimes. And I think people get away from that. And it's very ego driven and very judgment driven and very just like shoved down your throat, all this negativity. Like, when's the last time you even turned on any kind of religious service and it was positive? It's always like a negative, like, don't do this and don't do that and blah blah. And it's stuff that people know. Like, nobody needs to like hear it anymore. Like, which who on earth, other than certain uncontacted tribes, like who on earth has not heard about it by now? You know what I mean? Like, unless you're literally living under a rock somewhere, like you've heard about it, you know about it, but you probably know about it from a method that isn't helpful. And so, it's usually not presented in a very healthy, helpful way. And that's kind of what I have an issue with, is because I know that there is a version of Christianity and a version of religion that actually works, where people, their spirits get uplifted and they're happier and they're feeling better. But then you have all these kind of sick people that are in these religions that like infiltrate and always want to get leadership positions and screw with everybody's heads. And that's kind of where I come into issues, is that, sometimes these leaders can't be trusted. They don't know what they're saying. They don't study, and even if they do study, like there's conspiracies about different stuff that they don't even want to like reveal, and they hide information, and it's just stuff like that. And it's like, that's the kind of stuff I was raised around, where it's really hard to be like accepting of it, because I call BS on it. I'm like, I don't mess around with that stuff. I'm like, I will talk to who I want to talk to. I will do what I want to do with those people. We're not sniper rifling people off the top of the buildings and like shooting people and things. We're just hanging out, like who cares if there's a beer involved? Who cares if, I smoked a joint in the middle of a conversation? Like, it's really not a big deal. Like, I'm not saying people need to be druggies or whatever, but it's like, who cares if you're doing some social thing that like somebody thinks is not okay for you to do, you know? I mean, it's okay to party. I mean, Jesus partied, right? His first miracle was turning water to wine. I mean, and people want to argue, oh, it was unfermented. Like, no, it's wine. That's why they call it wine. Like, it wasn't unfermented wine. Um, so I don't know, man. Like, I don't really know what else to say about it. It's just, there's a mild amount of frustration. Um, but it's that frustration that leads me, and that leads me to kind of hold my own and kind of keep the ball rolling with the stuff that I'm trying to get done over here. I'm here for a reason, I'm not just here to, complain. Um, but that's kind of what it's like for me, just kind of living in an environment that's like, it's hard for me to record, because it's just like, I don't know. Like, I don't think I'm gonna be living um in an environment where there's gonna be people. Like, unless I'm choosing who I'm living with, unless I'm making that conscious decision to live with somebody that I am choosing to live with, not really out of necessity, I'm probably not gonna fully be enjoying living there. I'm a little particular with things that make me feel comfortable and safe, and I'm very, very like, sensitive to people, just, the ultra religious types, just because I grew up around all that. And it's very, I don't want to say hypocritical. That sounds like a very strong word to use, but it's somewhere along those lines. I think it's very ego driven. And, that's, I'm not saying that the ego is like completely wrong. It helps us, it protects us, but, I don't really want to be a part of people or groups of people who are just non accepting of others. Like, to me, that is not a way to live life. Now, I'm not saying people can't set boundaries and, have safe community and avoid the people who aren't safe. I wouldn't say that, I would say, I would encourage people to do that, but it's just hard, to be around negativity when it's like people don't even see that it's negativity. They kind of assume that, their religion, and I'm not just only picking on Christianity, it comes in other religions too, but in the US, Christianity is the most big mouth kind of, like, you hear about it the most, like you don't hear about Jews being out there, like you hear about it when you follow it, but it's like, when's the last time a Jewish person came up to you, maybe if you live in New York or something, but usually you don't have a lot of people that are kind of like preaching to you, unless it's a Christian person, you know, and part of me gets it, I'm not, there is that fine line. There's that fine line. There's the people who actually care, who want to do good, but then there's the people who kind of have this like brainwashed side of their mind that they can't really see that they're not helping people, that they're hurting people and they're not helping people, and they can't see the difference. They can't really see the difference to it because they think that the things that they're saying are going to be helpful to someone or uplifting to someone. It's just that tweaked kind of mindset where it's like the religion has taught people that there's a form of hate that they need to call love. You can slightly harass people and you're doing it out of love because you don't want them to go to hell. You can slightly offend someone to get underneath their skin out of love because you don't want them to go to hell. You can slightly start some kind of debate or argument with some random stranger because they might go to hell. You need to get in their head about this because they need to hear this message. It's so important. I mean, why aren't we talking about internet cookies? Why aren't we talking about the freaking government and all the weird, things that's going on with that kind of control system? And I think there's so much other stuff going on, but um, yeah, I mean, I need to go eat some breakfast, but that's kind of why I've been pretty silent on here. I've got a lot of back post stuff to post up, but this is, I mean, I don't know how else to explain it. Um, I'm not trying to not post. It's just I don't want to be posting about this all the time. This isn't really what I want to post on here. I like this podcast to be fun and uplifting, and not most of the time, but a lot of the time, my experiences that I'm having lately are kind of like retreat into my own shell, and like, you know, I'm kind of putting a lot of my energy into creative work, but not so much into like my social life as much. Um, my queer social life. I mean, I still hang out with my LGBT friends and talk to them and stuff, but it's not like I'm not like immersed, if that makes sense. I'm like immersed in another life over here. It's, immersion in a religious household, and so um like it's not that bad though, but it's just all the stuff that comes with it. It's like I can't just do what I want to do. Like, for example, I have YouTube primed up on the family TV, and there's things like that where one of my YouTube channels is called Hempication, and so I log into that one. I had it for a while because I was using a free trial on YouTube, And so that one was up there. And so just the name itself with the little marijuana symbol, or picture of a leaf as the symbol, that's something that was on there. Or if I put it under my main, you know, YouTube channel that it's under now, I had logged out of that one and logged into my main one that I actually pay for. Um, because I got the subscription back on my main one, and uh, so it's like, if I'm watching certain stuff or it wants to recommend to me certain stuff, a lot of it's finance stuff, but then a lot of it's LGBT stuff too. So it's like, um, I'll be scrolling around, and I've noticed, specifically like when I do look for stuff on YouTube, I've seen my mom kind of come over and like come near the TV so she can see me scrolling around on YouTube, like searching for stuff. Like when we used to watch The Sopranos together, it was because I had it on YouTube, and you know, I purchased. I think, yeah, I had all the seasons purchased on YouTube, and so we would watch it on there. So I'd have to like it was already logged in, and then even if I was searching it, it would show like my history and all this other stuff or recommendations so she could see it. And a lot of times it was like LGBT stuff, like Ashley Gavin were having gay sex and all these kind of like other people out there. And I know she sees it, and I know she strategically was standing there looking at it, because she never waits for me to log into anything. She would always go wash her hands or go take a bathroom break or make her plate of food or whatever. She'd never be in the room. But when it comes to that stuff specifically, I know that she's there. So it's like she knows that that shows what I'm watching. And it kind of gives a glimpse into what I've been watching. And so, just stuff like that where I'm just like, okay, whatever, you know. It kind of gets annoying to kind of try to, you know, uh, think about it, and it's draining and it's tiring, and I'm kind of over it. Um, I don't really find it pleasant to socially interact with people that are very closed-minded people. It's hard for me to be open-minded towards closed-minded people because I feel like they try to get in my way. I don't really like. I mean, I don't really like that at all. I don't like people trying to tell me what to do because of their religion. Uh, and I don't just want to pick on Christians, but in my life, that's what it is. It's mostly Christians. It's mostly Adventist Christians, and it's just really obnoxious. Um, and like I said, it's not even like at a point where it's like toxic. It's just in the air. And so I try to distance myself from it as much as possible because it doesn't help me at all. Um, I don't really find it to be helpful. Like there are things that I find to be helpful, like I said, like stuff about Jesus I find to be helpful, but just the kind of delusional way that people kind of try to think that they're actually helping people, and just the history of the church and everything. There's some stuff that I just don't want to be a part of. Um, it's just inexcusable. And, people do a lot of things in the name of their religions that they do it because that's really what they believe. They're kind of like fighting for it, but I don't think they realize how much it distances some people because a lot of people don't gravitate towards that. I really don't gravitate towards people, acting kind of forcefully about things. I don't mind hearing people's different perspectives on what they have to say, but past that, I don't want to go past that. It's like I like to know what people believe, but the second it goes into a judgment or telling me what they think I should do or something like that, then I'm like, here we go again. Somebody trying to create an unsafe space and some toxic environment because they think that's what they need to do. Um, I mean, I'm not saying people in religions need to be perfect or more perfect because everyone's human, but I think it's just a turn off. It's just a complete turn off. I think you could be religious and just leave people alone. I think it's possible to be religious. You could be very religious and not get in anybody's way and not step on anybody's toes. You can be non-religious and be, obnoxious towards people and harassing as well. Like it goes both ways, but um, I think it's just the definitions of things. I think a lot of times religious people don't really notice when they're offending people, or they don't notice, because they think they're right and they're not willing to hear any other kind of way of thinking about the world. Um, and that's dangerous to me, you know. Um, I think religions evolve if people let them. I think they evolve. I think spiritual beliefs and just like humankind in general evolves. Um, I mean, you know, we don't we don't really live in a society here where people are, killing babies or, ripping people's hearts out, like literally for some kind of medical or spiritual thing. Um, you know, I think people nowadays are kind of more focused on like, how can we get things on track with like our communities and our health and all that kind of stuff. Like earlier in my life, people weren't even talking about health. Like you hardly saw anybody focused on health. And nowadays it's really a conversation. Like nowadays people are focused on mental health, whereas before, 5 years ago, even most people, it was a stigma to most people. So, I would say, you know, um, things like that are important to take into consideration. Um, cause, um, I think there might be some danger in not moving forward. I don't know. There's nothing wrong with having traditions, but I think, you know, there might be something, um, that, if people can't see like a new way of thinking, you know, like at one point in society, you know, slavery was okay. At one point, the indigenous kids were getting taken away. At one point, people were being called savages. At one point, people were being called terrorists. And a lot of this was backed by, it's a combination of politics and religion. And people, there were people that were like outraged by it for sure, that were like, this is not loving, this is not helpful. And then there were a lot of people that were like, yeah, these people are some kind of heathen or some kind of, evil, that we need to get rid of that because they're not the same religion as us. And there was that mindset too. And so I feel like we've evolved out of that. Most of us have. And then there's other people who want to stay back there. I mean, it gives them a sense of power and control over people. And I think they don't really realize that that's what they like. They like feeling empowered. They like feeling in control. I think that's more so what it is. Who doesn't want to feel like the chosen people, who has all the answers, who has the full truth? Who doesn't want to feel that way? That's nice to feel that you have all the answers, that you just need to follow this thing that you're doing, and it doesn't matter if other people are getting hurt by it. You just need to follow it because this is going to lead you to some kind of glory at the end of things. Um, and I don't know, like that's just kind of how I see it. That's kind of a lot of my theories behind it. I have hours and hours worth of things I could say, but I really don't want to keep talking about it. But um, yeah, I mean, I haven't really been posting on here because I don't really want to talk about this kind of stuff all day long. Um, but I mean, if someone's loving, I don't care what religion they are, how strict of a religion they want to take. It's just, you can't crap all over people and call it love. It's not, and somewhere along the line that got twisted where, in a lot of religions, people feel like I can do bad towards people and it's in a loving way. It's almost like an abusive family member who's like, I can be abusive towards these people because, I need to be abusive so that they learn, or so that I'm trying to help them. There are people that are kind of deluded that way, that kind of think that way, that are like, I'm doing these bad things, but they don't see it as bad, so they keep doing it. They don't see it as hurtful, and so they keep doing it. And I feel like their eyes are so closed to it because religion teaches people to close their eyes to that kind of stuff and call it love when it's not love. Um, so that's what I have to say. Um, but I don't know. I don't want to be negative. I hope this doesn't sound too negative, but it's why I haven't been posting on here, is because that's mostly, the environment that I'm kind of in, where it's like, uh, it's not that bad, but it's more like, I don't want to get sucked into it. So I'm kind of doing my own thing. But, anyways, it's time to get on with the morning. Thanks for listening.